How did they get your name? How did they know who you were?
That was interesting because the way it works is, when I was a kid doing this work, along with all the other kids, we never knew who the boss was. We never knew who was paying us. We didn't give a shit, who was paying us. As long as that paper bag got slid across the kitchen table, we were all happy, man. We didn't even care. So when I started taking, and doing jobs on my own, which only happened because everybody went to prison, and then two guys that I happened to know in Miami, just out of serendipitously, how it happened was I drove a Winnebago full of that 55 tons of shit because I didn't have enough drivers. I made $75,000 the first night hauling it inshore, and they paid me $35,000 to drive this fucking Winnebago, brand new, to Miami, that had about 11,000 pounds of bales in it, and it couldn't go to the dead drops plaza because you got within 40 feet of this fucking thing, you could smell it, right?
Oh, fuck.
It had to go right to the house.
Okay.
So what Daryl needed was somebody he could trust to do this. So he said, and I go over there just to see what's going on, and I get shackled into this thing, man. He said, Timmy, come here. He says, I would like you to drive this to Miami if you wouldn't mind. I said, no, fuck, like that. And he said, it's a $35,000 job. I said, well, I just made $75,000 that night. I didn't give a fuck about the money.
Right.
But because of who it was asking me, I felt obligated. Yeah, okay, he's the boss. This is, okay, what the fuck? So we put airbags in the springs of this thing. And you inflate the airbags, and it lifts this Winnebago off the ground, right, so its ass is not sparking the highway when it's going down the road, right? So I'm driving this behemoth down fucking 41 all the way to Miami to Chrome Avenue, and I hang a right, and I go off, and I'm driving down back into this orange field, and there's this looking castle. It looks like a castle. It just doesn't belong there. And I pull up the side door, and the guys jump out. They start unloading the shit, taking it into the basement. And the guys were teasing me before I took this ride. They were telling me about, how many people have been murdered in this house, man. These guys are insane, fucking Cuban freaks, like this. And
really,
I just was hearing it,
Yeah.
It didn't occur to me it was that way at all. And it wasn't really. When I got over there, I had to spend the day. They'd asked me to spend the day because when the loads quit coming for that day, I was to drive a car with money in it back home. Because I drove the Winnebago, I needed to get home. So, so I don't know how much money was in this fucking car. It was jam-packed full. And I was there all day, playing cards and, goofing off, getting to know the guys and shit like that. So fast forward now, when everybody gets busted and shit, and they go to prison, they go to jail, and these guys still got work to do. They only knew one face. They never saw any of the other crew. Nobody ever drove to the stash houses. They were always dead dropped. Nobody knew anybody. That was the way it was kept. You don't know them. They don't know us.
Right.
I never saw your face. I don't know who the fuck you are or anything like this, but me. I was chosen to drive straight to the fucking house, spend the day with these guys. So now when everybody gets busted, and, it wasn't 2-3 months later, I get a knock on my door, and I open the door, and there's this guy, Jorge, from that fucking house in Miami. Timmy! It took them 3 weeks to find me.
What?
They knew my name was Tim. They knew what I looked like, but they took them 3 weeks, and they found me. And they said, Timmy, man, we got shit backing up. Can you do this work?
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the best bongs in the business. With Freeze Pipe's freezable glycerin coils, you will enjoy colder, bigger hits without the throat burning or intense coughing. Check out Freeze Pipe's entire line of unique pipes, bubblers, bongs, and dab rigs at thefreezepipe.com and use the code CONCRETE to save 10% off your first order. That's thefreezepipe.com and use the code KONCRETE.
And I just, without even thinking about it, yeah, fuck yeah, like that,
What did they want you to do?
Haul the pot for them.
Okay.
The grown-ups weren't there to set the
They
deals
got
and go buy the shit and all that. They're in prison. These Cubans still had work to do. They needed us to continue doing the work. Mm-hmm. Well, the infrastructure was still there. Like I said earlier, the kids that did all the work, I mean, we were all there, because they got the visible guys at that time. the older generations.
Right.
They had no idea the kids were doing this. Fuck, there were 19-20-year-old kids driving boats, full of pot through the islands and shit. They never occurred to them. So I went back and got everybody was there. The only thing I had to figure out was how much to charge the fuckers, where to go get the shit, and all this kind of stuff, which I wound up getting from one of the other generations, keyed me in on their connection and how it's done and how to pay. And the price I had come up with, on my own was pretty close to what they were charging, because by that time I had worked almost every position. I was a bail handler. I was loading cars. I was unloading freighters. I was, whenever they needed somebody, I worked it, and then I got paid that pay. Well, the pay scales are different for every job you do. The bail handlers get $5,000 a night. The guys that drive the cars will get $30,000 a trip. They pay their drivers out of that. The guys that have the smaller boats that come out to get the shit from our boat, from the mothership, those little boats making it through the islands, they're about $35,000 a piece. They pay their guy on board out of that. We're on the big boat with the load. I make $75,000 or $100,000 a night. So that's how it all works. So I just reverse engineered the math.
Right.
And came up with a number about how many people we needed for this, and it was pretty close. Now, there's two ways to do it. There's pay me $175 a pound. I'll go to Colombia, Jamaica, Central America, wherever the fuck you want, and get your shit and put it on your doorstep in Miami for $175 a pound. Or you can pay me $145 a pound. You go get the shit. You bring it out here offshore. I'll come and unload you and bring it and put it on your doorstep in Miami. I'll do it that way. But most of the guys opted for me to just do the whole fucking thing because they didn't want to bother with it.
Right.
And that's how it worked.
Wow, man.
And I just managed figuring that. So I went from being this guy that was running offshore unloading boats. It's just all of a sudden I'm the guy that's
Now you're making it all happen.
Yeah. So So I get the first job in. Everybody's paid. Everybody's happy. So we do another one, and then. That's when the guy started, with me about the cocaine. Let's do a load of coke, dude. Hey, man, it's fucking easy. I'm like, no. Well, for one reason, there's, a whole different crowd of people fucking around with that shit. And and then I told him about the holding money kind of thing. I didn't want to do that either. But little did I know that the only two guys from Miami that I mentioned in my book are Carlito and Leo. Carlito and Leo, as it turns out, wound up being two soldiers of Griselda Blancos.
Really? Holy shit!
I didn't know this until I researching my own shit.
Wow.
So and then it finally occurred to me. I'm thinking, okay, what? So we're counting money, and the loads are getting bigger, so the cash is getting more. Some of the jobs are going for $25-30 million, and I'm taking my cut out of that. While they get their cut. So I've got to count. I'm counting, at any time, my crew's, 10, 12, 15, 20 million for my crew, and I've got to count it. So we had, at one point, 4 money machines that the banks use, going constantly. And we had hundreds in one bedroom, 50s in another, 20s in another, 10s in another, and 5s in the garage. Because, $5 bills were ridiculous, dude. Nobody wanted them.
Crazy.
Because
just burn them, right?
Just $50,000 in $5 bills is as big as this fucking table, But the thing of it was when I got paid, or anybody did really, you couldn't just take hundreds. I had to take multiples of denominations, spread it out a little bit like that. So,
why was that?
Well, it's because, it's just a fair thing to do.
Okay.
Somebody's going to wind up with a fucking garage full of 5s.
Yeah.
Who's going to want that?
Right.
And, 80% of them, $5 bill. And I got a bundle of them one time, $5 bills. They're shrunk wrap, in probably about a 1x1 square like this. Opened it up and they were moldy. It was mildewed because money mildews.
Yeah.
And they put these goddamn rubber bands around them, and the bacteria on the rubber bands on the money starts to deteriorate in the rubber bands. A rubber band gets after a while.
Oh, yeah.
It falls apart and shit like that.
Right.
Well, that's because money's nasty, And I've gotten paid with $20 bills that were and the mold flying out of them, shit. So, because the money's just being handed like this. You're never getting time to spend it at that level.
Right.
So I get a